Now the problem I had when I ordered my windows was that the jambs on the windows are a little bit different. And the reason being is because we have insulated sheathing on the outside and then 2x4 walls on the inside. Now if it was just a standard 2x4 wall with regular sheathing, it wouldn't be a problem. You can order those jambs and they would fit nicely, being able to just trim over the window. Now, the issue is the 1 inch of foam that we have on the outside, extending those jambs, and it's just not a typical jamb depth that was available when we ordered the windows. We also wanted the windows to get here in time so that we could get them installed and move on with the process. So today I'm gonna be installing the window jambs so that we can finish trimming out the windows. And I'm gonna show you how I'm gonna do that. The way that I have done it is I've essentially got a piece of scrap material here. This is, I think, 3/8 thick. Our jambs are gonna be recessed into the window well 3/8 of an inch. So I'm gonna take this piece of scrap and I'm gonna line it up with the inside of the window, and I'll just mark a line on the corners of the window. Now I'll do that on all 4 corners, but let me show you what that looks like. So right there you can see I've got my corner marked out, and that is gonna be the inside of my window trim. The nice thing about that is I can go all the way around the window and mark these little lines and be able to fine tune that trim so I have a nice consistent reveal all the way around the window. So I'm gonna be building the jambs out of 1x6 primed material. However, obviously I'm gonna have to measure and figure out how I need to rip that down to bring that out flush to the wall. That way our trim can set over it nice and uniformly with no gaps. So I'll go ahead around this window and mark those lines. I'm gonna mark all the corners, and I'm also gonna mark a couple of spots just like kind of in the middle of the window. That way I can, like I said, fine tune that jamb and get it to match up with a nice consistent reveal all the way around the window. Now the reason I went with 3/8 of an inch is because, especially with these are fixed windows, and I feel like having just a very small reveal around the window will just make this window frame less noticeable, and it'll be more glass, more view, all of that. So once we get done, you'll see how this idea comes to fruition and if it's a good one or not. I guess time will tell. So I'll go ahead and mark that all out now, and then we'll move on to the cutting process. All right, so as you can see, I've gone ahead and marked out the corners and then just kind of a couple of these lines along the edge of the window all the way around. I know that might be hard to see, but I'll show you how I'm gonna measure now. Essentially what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna measure, so the sides of the jamb, I'll run from the base or the sill plate up, and then the top and bottom, I'll be pocket screwing the entire jamb together at those joints. So the top and bottom will just be from this line to this line, and the top and bottom will extend up to probably as high as I can go without, leaving me a little bit of room to get it in there, but close to the top from the bottom. So I kind of ideally I want this frame or jamb to rest on the bottom plate. So I'll come up here, that looks like about 53.5. Verify over here, yeah, about the same, 53.5. Now, when I measure from a precise line to line like this, obviously the heights or lengths of the sides don't matter as much. But when I measure from the side to side, essentially what I'm gonna do is I'll just kind of bend this tape and I'll put we'll call it 2 inches, put the 2-inch mark on that line, and then I'll measure over here, verifying that I'm still on there. And it looks like 47 5/8. So now I've got to subtract that 2 inches from where I started my tape. So we're at 45 and 5/8. Verify the same on the bottom. And we got, yeah, same thing, 47 and 5/8. So 45 and 5/8. I have a horrible memory, so I'm gonna go ahead and write that down now. 45 and 5/8. And then again, horrible memory, so I'm gonna check this. So top and bottom, sides, 53 and a half. Okay, so let's go make some cuts. As you can see, it's very cold outside, so I'm gonna bundle up and go make these cuts. Oh, I'm forgetting something. So obviously we have to measure the thickness of the jam, or the depth of the jam. We know the lengths. The depth is 4 inches there, just under 4 inches there, 4 inches there. It's like about 4 inches all the way around. Should be good. It's a little bit more. Yeah, I think 4 inches should do it. All right, 4 inches deep, let's go cut. So as I said before, it is not warm outside. It's currently 17 degrees out here and it feels like 7. It says that the feels like temperature will be around 1 degree at 4 p.m. So we're gonna try and make this quick. Let's get my measurements. Top and bottom, 45 and 5/8. Actually, let's do the sides first. 53 and a half. Oh my gosh. This is so cold. 45 and 5/8. At least I won't feel it if I cut myself. All right, so like I said, we've got to rip these down to 4 inches. So I'm gonna adjust my table saw to 4 inches. And yes, I realize it would be warmer if I cut all this on the inside. But there's too much stuff in the way, so this is what you get. Okay, so I've got some feeling back in my fingers now, and I'm gonna go ahead and drill the pocket holes for the frame. Now I've got the top and the bottom pieces. These are the ones that are gonna get the pocket holes, but I wanna point out that I'm using some pre-prime trim. I think it's actually called Windsor 1. And I really like this stuff. It's very stable. The primer coat that they have on there is very good. I've worked with it a lot and I like it. But as you can see, there's some writing and some scuffs on the back side. So there's a good side and there's a bad side. So I'm gonna drill the pocket holes in the bad side because that is gonna be kind of the outside of the frame that's gonna be hidden. So we're gonna be using 1 1/4" screws and the Craig jig set at for 3/4 inch material. So I'll go ahead and get the pocket holes drilled and both ends of both of these boards, and then I'll show you how we assemble them. All right, now before we actually start the assembly process, I need to know kind of where my top and bottom is gonna fall. I could just measure this and kind of translate those measurements to these boards. However, I found it a little bit easier and more precise to do it this way. So we've got these 2 pieces of trim. Obviously we want our good side facing in, and we've got an unprimed side, which we cut. It's gonna have saw marks and everything on it. We'll keep the prime side out. So this is gonna be our right-hand side. I'll go ahead and just draw a big R on there for right. So I can put this kind of where it's supposed to go, and I'm just gonna mark the top line and the bottom line. And then I'll do the same thing with the other side. Okay, we've got left, write an L on there, put that on the the sill, top and bottom. Let's go assemble. All right, I'm working in the living room because, well, we decided to use this past summer and we've got some furniture and stuff in here so that we could enjoy it. But now, unfortunately, I've got to work around it. Luckily, I've got this makeshift coffee table that was left over when we bought the place and somehow has managed to stick around this entire time. It's turned out to be a nice work surface. So I've got my mark. This is the bottom of my right-hand piece. So I'm gonna take this speed square and I'm gonna line it up with that mark, and then I'm just going to clamp it to my workbench. All right, so I got that clamped. And then we've got one of our sides. Now, obviously this is the unprimed, I'm not sure if you can see that, but this is the unprimed side that we cut. So we wanna make sure that we keep the same sides so that everything matches up. And we got all the prime sides on one edge. Now, before I secure that, I'm gonna use some Rapid Fuse. This is just like an instant curing wood adhesive, a CA glue, as a lot of people, or that's kind of the generic term for it. So I just put a bead of that down there. That's just gonna add a little bit more strength. I know we're gluing to a primed surface. It's better than paint, but it's not ideally wood to wood bonding, which is why we're gonna be using some screws. So I'll go ahead and set this. And the reason I'm using this speed square is actually so that as I secure this with my screws, it won't creep forward. It'll stay where I want it to go. Now, obviously you could be using like a corner clamp or something along those lines, but I don't have any of that with me today, so we're gonna use what we got. All right, that is the bottom. Now let's spin this around and we'll attach the top. Same way, put your speed square down on that line, clamp it all to the work surface so it doesn't get a little tippy. Bead of glue, glue and screw. All right, again, making sure now the prime side is on this side. We're gonna line that up. Oh, that's wrong. There we go. Okay, now we'll kind of get this out of the way and move. Okay, so this is our top. Now we're going to, yep, we'll do that. Put our speed square here again. And this is gonna be right, so once we flip that over. Now the issue is that obviously both of these pieces are going to set in at once. So I'm gonna go ahead and lay down my bead of glue on this side, and then I'll go over there and lay another bead of glue down. All right, now I just gotta get this thing flipped over. I do like the speed square trick because that kind of makes sure everything's nice and perpendicular too. Now we'll go down to the other end and get everything lined up. Okay, now let's go see if this actually fits. That looks pretty good. Now, for the secret sauce. It's not really a secret, but it's kind of my secret. Secret to me. Anyway, they work really well, and these are trim head screws, but they have a reverse head. So up here at the top, the threads are actually threaded backwards. And the cool thing about that is, obviously it's got a very small trim head, so it's not gonna make much of a hole, but as you put this screw in, you can snug it all the way down just below the surface, and then you can actually back it out and then fine tune it to the lines that we have drawn on there from earlier. So I'll show you that now. And what I do is I take my little spacer block, rather than shimming it at this point, whoa, that actually fell moved out. Luckily it caught on something. So I'll go ahead and get this screw started at the top. Now I'm gonna use my spacer block so it doesn't have to suck it all the way into the wall. Now these are 3 inches long, so they're gonna fill this gap just fine, and they'll be long enough to really get into that stud. So what I did there was I was securing it to the wall, but I hadn't lined up the top. You really need to kind of line up the top, and maybe I should be doing the bottom first. Yeah, let's try the bottom first. All right, so I'll get my side lined up. Sink that just below the surface, and then I can bring it back up. And get it like exactly where I want. All right, so this is that top left corner. And as you can see, we need to get that lined up with that vertical line. I am going to put my spacer block kind of just off of the screw. We've got it just below the surface, and now if I hit reverse on the drill, I can get it right on that line. And then I've got a perfectly consistent reveal all the way around. Now obviously, I've got to do the same right here. You can see that that is off. So again, we'll just take another one of these screws. That looks good. All right, so I think you guys get the point with the screws. Now I'm just gonna go all the way around the window and get everything nice and lined up as perfectly as I can so we get those consistent reveals all the way around. And then we'll move on to the next step. All right, that looks pretty good. Now one thing that does frustrate me a little bit is that either this window frame is bowed slightly, or my cut was not perfectly straight, which is also very possible because it is like 2 degrees outside. But nonetheless, I've got a few little gaps, about 1/8 of an inch or so, down here and up here. But I think those will fill with caulk. You know what they say, caulk and paint make you the carpenter that you ain't. So we'll go ahead and get that done at some point once we get all the window ready to caulk in. But now we need to install some trim. Now the trim that I have kind of selected for this house, I did the same trim on my house and I really like it. The reason I really like it is because it uses different width materials with overhangs and different thicknesses. And the nice thing about that is the corners don't have to be mitered, they don't have to meet up perfectly, so if there's any inconsistencies, which there will be because I'm doing the trimming, and I am not by any means a trim carpenter, those inconsistencies will be hidden with those different thicknesses and different widths of material and the overhangs and all of that. So essentially what we'll be doing to case this window out is we'll be using 1x4s on the sides, and then the top and bottom will actually get a 5/4 by 6 board. And that 5/4 by 6 board is actually 1 inch thick, whereas the 1x4s are 3/4 of an inch thick. So we'll have varying thicknesses at the top joint, and then plus the 5/4 by 6, what I've been doing is overhanging it on both ends by 1/2 inch. So again, no inconsistencies, or if there are inconsistencies, they're hidden, and I don't have to miter the corners. It just kind of makes the whole process nice and quick and easy. So let's go cut some trim, get that up, see what we're working with. Oh, the other thing that I want to point out is that, as you probably noticed, and I'm sure there will be people in the comments that comment on this, I did not shim around the jamb. Now, the reason that I didn't do that is because, well, I've got screws in it that are going to hold it in place, especially with those reverse threads. The other thing is that the bottom of this, you know, the joints of this jamb are all screwed together, so I don't really worry about it moving too much. Also, once we get our trim in place, the trim will actually be nailed onto the jamb itself, adding some more support as well to hold that all in place. So I just wanted to point that out. I have done in the past, especially with bigger boards, like in our basement, we've got some patio doors that have deep, really deep jambs. So what I have done in the past is I've shot some spray foam in there, some low expanding spray foam, and what that does is that kind of fills that whole void and just makes it impossible for it to move, especially move in. The other thing that that does is it makes it a pain in the butt if you ever have to replace it. But I don't think I'm gonna be around long enough to ever want to replace these door jambs, or at least I hope not. Okay, so the first thing we're gonna do when it comes to that trim that I just talked about is the 1x4s on the sides. So I want to leave an 1/8 of an inch reveal. And what that means is essentially the trim is gonna be set back from this edge by an 1/8 of an inch. That's gonna give you just a little room to caulk that joint and just kind of make it look nice, and it gives a little shadow line that is, well, that's what people do, so that's what I'm gonna do. That also means that the top and bottom are gonna have the same reveal. So when I measure this, what I'll do is I'll measure from the inside of the top to the inside of the bottom, which is giving me 51 3/4, a 1/16 under 51 3/4, whatever that is, or a 1/16 over 51 5/8. So I usually just, rather than working in 16ths, I'll just put in a plus or a minus, and that'll give me an idea of where I need to be. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna add 1/4 of an inch to that. So 51 3/4, we're at 52. That's gonna give me an 1/8 inch on both sides. So 52 light, we'll call it. And ooh, we are a little bit more over here. So we're at like 52 1/8. That's with the extra 1/4. So 52, call it 52 over here, and 52 1/8 over there. We'll go ahead and get some 1x4s cut for the sides of this. All right, so I've got the board that I cut for the right side, and I've got the board that I cut for the left side. Now, like I said, you want an 1/8 inch reveal, so you can kind of look at your tape measure and get an idea of what an 1/8 inch looks like, or you can just mark it on here, which is probably the better idea. Mark an 1/8 inch in. All right, so I've got 2-inch 18 gauge brad nails in my brad nailer, and I'm gonna start by lining this up. One thing that I do want to point out is that when it comes to nailing trim, you've probably seen in some of these houses where the trim moves, and unfortunately a lot of people don't nail into the wood. You really need like kind of that wood connection. Some people will just nail into the drywall. Now, when it comes to a window like this, obviously there's gonna be wood studs here and across the bottom and across the top. We've got, since this is an exterior window, we've got a header across the top, so we've got plenty of wood across there and the bottom. The other thing is you wanna make sure, obviously, like I said before, that you're getting that nail into that wood. So I'm using a 2-inch nail, and these are 3/4 of an inch thick. I've got a 1/2 inch of drywall. So it's got to go through 3/4 plus a 1/2, that's 1 1/4 inches. So I should get 3/4 of an inch of that nail into that wood over there. Now I'm going to start by nailing into this stud right here. So I'll go ahead and get this lined up so that my reveals are where I want them. And I'll just drive one nail in there, that's going to hold that in place. And then I can kind of match that reveal at the top. And you can just throw couple in the middle for good measure. Now, one thing that I want to point out, this is actually looking pretty good, but you can look at this reveal here, and since I haven't shimmed or done anything to this inside, this reveal actually looks pretty consistent. It might be a little bit out right here, but what I could do, let's just try to fine tune that so you can see what I'm talking about. Actually, Let me pull the camera over here. I don't know if you're gonna be able to see that, but essentially at the bottom, that reveal is a little bit smaller, and at the top, it's a little bit smaller, which essentially means that this board right here needs to come in a little bit right there. So I'll just take one of these screws, and since my trim is not attached to this board yet, I can kind of feather this in. Obviously it's a little too tight now, so I'll just back it out, and then that looks pretty good right there. I know that's kind of very small, but I did want to point out that you have the ability to do that. So now that I've got this reveal nice and consistent, it's where I want, I'm gonna nail this wood to this jamb. And one thing that some people overlook is that the way that you hold the nailer matters. So you could just go up like this, but these nails, the nails in the nailer have this kind of specific pattern to them. So the way that they go like that, as they go in, they're gonna wanna go to the sides, right? So if you hold it, if you nail through here, this nail could come out the inside of your jamb, which is what we don't want. So what you do to prevent that is you hold it sideways. And again, we're just gonna nail this trim board into this jamb. All right, that looks pretty good. Now we'll just do the same thing for the other side. I'm gonna try not to break my TV in the process. So we got the two side pieces up, that's looking pretty good. Now we'll measure for the top and the bottom boards. Those are gonna be those 5/4 boards like I said before. So essentially, I'm gonna measure from outside to outside, which here I've got 52 3/4 plus a 1/16. I'll add an inch to that. We're gonna have a 1/2 inch overhang on both sides. So that will be 53 3/4 plus a 1/16. 52 3/4 plus a 1/16. So these are the same, 53 3/4 plus a 1/16. Now, the trick is, can I remember that by the time I get down to the saw? Running up and down those stairs inside, kind of get you warmed up. Now, the issue with this board is that, well, like I said before, it's an inch thick, which is great. It's gonna look great. But the problem is that now I've got an inch and then a 1/2 inch of drywall before I can get to my stud. I've only got 2-inch nails, so I'm only gonna get about a 1/2 inch of a nail into that stud. And in my opinion, that's not quite enough. It's better than nothing, but it's not quite enough. So what I'm gonna do is first make sure that we've got this 1/2 inch overhang. All right, so we'll just kind of center that up. Again, inconsistencies are not super noticed. Just get a couple nails in here. Kind of stand back and admire our craftsmanship. And we'll put a couple more nails in there. That was very random. All right, our reveal across the top looks good. So we'll just go ahead and nail this into that wood. Now, these nails are gonna keep this bottom part because they're right into the wood, right? So they're gonna keep this bottom part from bowing coming out. Problem is the top, and I've seen this happen before in my own house because I've done it. The top could start to, if this board cups, it could start to kind of pull away from the wall. So again, I'll just use a couple of these trim screws to go into our stud. And that's gonna snug that up. That hole will fill up with nail or wood filler, and you'll never even know it was there. Okay, that looks pretty sharp. Now for the bottom. Man, I'm breathing heavy. Going up and down the stairs. Now obviously we can use these nails above as kind of a guide for where our stud is in the wall. I can see a little dip right here in my reveal. So before I nail this to that frame, I'll just make that adjustment. Kind of want to find the low point. That way you can get it just right. Obviously you can adjust the screws that are already in there, but that looks pretty good. Now the other thing that you can do instead of using these screws is you can actually glue this to the drywall. That'll kind of solidify all that and hold everything together as well. However, I just didn't feel like breaking out a tube of glue just for this, so maybe on the other ones. What do they say? That's not going anywhere. All right, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know it's a little bit different style of video. However, you know, there's a lot of projects like this that this is just an easier way to film for me, and I feel like it's more personal. But as you can see, we're in the master bedroom, and I did a video on this ceiling before, and in my opinion, it's pretty sweet. So you might want to go check that one out. I'll be sure to link that one up at the end. But also be aware that one of my future videos that's going to be coming out is going to be kind of some mistakes. I'm going to be highlighting some mistakes that I have made over the years that have kind of made my trim appear less than satisfactory. It's kind of been a learning curve for me. Again, I'm not a trim carpenter, but I do enjoy this stuff, and I do enjoy the process of learning, and I hope you do too. Until next time, be safe and happy building. I'm going to get back to trimming out the rest of these windows.